Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight I'm proud to bring you Living Theurgy with our panel of living theurgists. And I will go clockwise as I always do. We have Apollonius, also known as Bruce McClellan, and also known as John Opsopeus. Tony Mierzwicki, we have Jean-Louis de Biasi, and we have Brandy Williams. Greetings and welcome, O theurgists. Today we're going to ask the question, which is very important to ask every now and then. Where are you now? What are you studying now? What knowledge has your attention now? We're going to start with Apollonius.
Well, as we were discussing before we came on, one of the things I'm reading now, especially closely, is Gregory Shaw's new book, Hellenic Tantra. And I'm only about halfway through it, actually. I'm reading all the footnotes and thinking about it all as I go through it. It is very interesting, and maybe we can talk about it a little more later. I don't want to go on too long right at the moment. Beyond that, I've got a project going, basically to reconstruct Hypatia's lecture notes, which don't exist, but on the other hand, we can make a pretty good guess what they would have been because there were handbooks of Platonism around in her times, and some of them survive. And so we basically, if she did like most teachers do, what do? You start with a good textbook and teach out of the textbook. And so if she was doing that, then, we pretty much know what she was teaching. So I've been reading some of those old handbooks of Platonism and Neoplatonism that have survived from ancient times. It's very interesting. They're kind of like, the ancient version of an idiot's guide to whatever. They summarize all of the key points, kind of like Cliff Notes or something, and give it in a very terse and sort of systematic form. But it's very nice to see that as opposed to reading, all of the dialogues and you may have trouble, putting together that and all of the commentaries to really see what it's all about. So they're still useful, but so that's the other thing I'm reading at this time, and then very closely because I'm retranslating some of them as well. So I'm plodding through those things.
Well, thank you. And our hero now is honored to have you in it. And I imagine some future version of Brandy in many incarnations when she updates her work on Theurgist, writing a chapter about you, Apollonius.
I don't know about that.
Thank you very much. Tony Mierzwicki.
I've actually got two projects that I'm working on at the moment. The first one is that Susan and I have been working on a podcast which we're calling the Zeus and Hera Show. Basically, the sort of stuff that I was doing previously, interviewing authors and the like. But the other thing that I'm doing, which is really exciting, is that there's a coven in LA which has basically been working the Wheel of the Year, but they've had a strong Hecate focus, and they've contacted me about putting together a program for them, an annual program for them, where they can start to make their workings more authentically Greek. So I'm actually trying to structure that. So we're looking at, they have four main Sabbats a year that they're working with, the two solstices, Beltane and Samhain. And what I'm trying to do is to come up with equivalent Greek festivals, but we'd be working with the actual proper Athenian lunisolar calendar. So it's what I'm trying to come up with at the moment. They want to keep it authentic, but they still want to have that witchcrafty type feel before. There was one author who tried to do something like this years ago, Jennifer Reef, where she tried to incorporate Greek festivals into the Wheel of the Year. That didn't go as well as it probably should have. So I'm having another go at it as well. And if we come up with something really worthwhile, maybe I'll approach Llewellyn about doing a book on it. So that way, not only would I have the theory of how we're putting together the whole thing, but after working with this coven for a year, we could see how well it all goes. And it could well be a blueprint for other covens around the world. They're already being contacted by other covens that want to have more of a Hecatean focus in their working. So I'm actually been really excited working with them. So in 2 weeks' time, I'm doing my first lecture with them. I've been with them for preliminary meetings, but the work actually starts in 2 weeks' time. So I'm really excited. And the thing I like most about it is that they want to try to keep things as authentically Greek as possible. I just finished working my way through one book where there was a guy who was trained by Biasi, and they've totally changed the the ancient Greek calendar, and they fitted everything onto a normal calendar. So they work with a 12-month system, and in each month they have one major festival, and on top of that they might work a new moon or a full moon as well. But they're working with our calendar as well. So I think it's exciting when people want to work with the lunar calendar. Anyway.
That sounds very exciting. Hecate has a long history in my works in this incarnation. Hecate is one of the few that when there have been encounters where it's like talking to a real 3D sense-around, present person. She doesn't appear as a crone. She appears as a very young woman. And a lot of the children of Hecate popped up in the things that I do and have assisted at various points. So I'm very grateful to Hecate. So I congratulate you on this new task, and I look forward to learning more about it. I know Cleo is going to be interested in it as well, because she identifies as a child of Hecate.
Now, I just wanted to say one more thing. Brandy pointed out a few weeks ago that Jason Mankey had told her that whenever anyone would write a blog on Hecate, then ratings would kind of go through the roof. Everyone's excited about Hecate. And there was an event just a couple of weeks ago in the UK. It was a Hecate focused convention. It was an online convention, and I sort of found out about it after it had already taken place. But there is certainly a lot of interest in Hecate in pagan circles. So I'm going to see how things pan out.
See if you notice the mom phenomenon with Hecate. I've noticed that when people talk about Hecate, if they have relationships with Hecate, they say the word mom in a particular way that's very distinct.
Wow.
I know that the ones that I interact with haven't interacted with each other, so I would always wonder if that's particular to Hecate and her folks, or if it's something going around in the community that people pick up on in effect. So let's see if we can. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Jean-Louis de Biasi, to whom we all owe papers.
Just a question for Bruce first. Can you share with us your reading list? Because you are talking a lot about several very exciting books, and I am interested.
Okay, certainly. I mean, this is if you can see it, the Hellenic Tantra by Greg Shaw just came out, and I will be happy to send you the others, but it's Alcinous textbook of Platonism is one of the sources, and Porphyry's Aphormai for starting points for the investigation of the intelligibles, I think is what the title is, and Solustius, you probably know, on the gods and the cosmos. So those are kind of my three primary sources that I'm working on right now in terms of this Hypatia project.
Okay. Yeah, just a short remark about Hecate. You know that I am the Grand Master of the Iron Solis, and for at least 6 years, maybe more, we have several guilds for a very long time in the order, inner guilds, that are composed of initiates that are focusing on some research. And we have a guild of Hecate for at least 7 years or a little more. So they did a huge, deep research on, let's say, they wrote a dictionary about the different names of Hecate, practices, work. So this is a kind of semi-private work, but very interesting, of people from the Middle East, from Spain, from South America. So they were working on that and still are. So this is not part of the main curriculum of the order, but this is these kind of small groups who are dedicated to a specific deity, in this case, Hecate. We had the same for therapists. We had a guild focusing on therapists for a very long time, with a medal, with specific practices. So we are always talking about make some works that are really extensive, public or not. We are still debating on that. Some people are against, mostly I am against, and others are pushing to publish. So I am sure that this year we will find a middle ground and publish at least something. And Hecate will be a first one. And on my part of Hecate, I worked on more visual things like ancient medals dedicated to Hecate. So they should be available in a couple of months, and every time linked to a specific practice. And I am talking about Hecate, and it will be the same for therapists. So we had that in the past, but as I said, it was private. But regarding the medals and the practices linked to the medals, yes, it will be public. So it was a short note about that, because you were talking about Hecate. On my part, what I am focusing right now is not exactly what we are talking about, but I am working on translations of ancient Kabbalistic texts coming from the Kabbalistic Rose Cross tradition, Kabbalistic Order of the Rose Cross, and there will be two courses will be released this weekend. One about deep, really deep interpretation of Genesis. So this is the Hebrew tradition, not the Platonic tradition, not the pagan tradition, unfortunately. Nevertheless, this tradition is really interesting, ancient, for those who are interested a little bit by Kabbalah. This is, you know, that this order has been created and founded in 1888, so this is not new. And what they did at the time was really interesting, but never translated in English. So this is what we do with an automatic translation and correcting few things, but still we can really understand. And on the part of paganism and Platonism, I am focusing a lot on, this is something usual for us, but death and rebirth. Every rituals, every thing related to the last minute we will live in this life. So the initiations linked to that, practices, rituals, and so on. This is what I'm doing and working on. For some part public, for some parts not. With few things I will speak about in a couple of months, yes, but focusing mainly on that. So, and this is not something sad, you know that, because we continue after that. But we have all that in common. We will all die. So this is the main and the supreme mystery. And in this case, I think, and in the tradition, this is something important to focus on, really. Thank you.
I think that's important too. That is a very important thing, and a lot of my focus is on the end of this life and the beginning of the next. I have had spinal problems and shadows of other things that are darker coming from the future. So I'm very much focused on, you know, my legacy and all the things that I've learned. I haven't even begun to touch them because I've been focusing on other topics that are related to, but not really essential to what I personally learned. So I'm trying to figure out ways of conveying the things that I've learned. And I know too that death is not the end, but it is the end of a chapter. And
Right.
I've enjoyed this chapter very much. And I want to enjoy it a little bit.
Epicureanism is a good path.
But that is awesome that you're doing this work. It's very much needed. And I'm looking forward to when I get my things in order, having a stream of people who, want to be initiated into the Aurum Solus. I already have a couple. So once I reorganize my groups, I've relocated from Pennsylvania to northwestern New Jersey, and I've been in northeastern New Jersey, so it takes a while to restart things up and set them in motion, but we're getting there. So again, as always, you're awesome, and in addition to the Aurum Solus, you also have the Rosicrucian and the Masonic traditions that you're the Grand Master of. So you have a very unique perspective, not in what came before and what is remembered and what can we recapture, but in things that are in the now.
Thank you.
Brandy.
Before we move to Brandy, I just wanted to ask Jean-Louis something. Would I be able to access the material that you're putting together for the book on Hecate? I'm at the moment I'm working through Stephen Ronan's anthology, which is it's a scholarly anthology of writings on Hecate. But anything else that I can get would be very, very helpful to me. And seems like your work is coming along at the right time for me.
If I am correct, we will have maybe the opportunity to meet sometime soon in LA. We talked about that, and it will be
Yes.
a good opportunity to go deeper on that.
I would like that very much. So
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I'll move on to Brandy
No,
now,
that's
but I
fine.
just yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And Tony, I just put a link in the chat to, you probably know it, but Sarah Iles Johnston's book, Hecate Sotera.
Yes.
Yeah, you know the book, okay. And
I've got it. Yeah.
This is an excellent book, really.
And I have to, I look at Tony and I look at Jean-Louis and I look at Apollonius writing, and I think about the ancient theurgists who were all teachers and had little groups around them, and you're all getting these little groups, and Hercules too has these little groups. So it's just wonderful to see that happening in the contemporary world. Oh, I'm so honored to be in this company, actually. I want to talk actually about what we were talking about, because Apollonius mentioned that Gregory Shaw had this book, Hellenic Tantra, and I've been following his work for some time as he kind of developed this thought. It's since Theurgy and the Soul, he's had this thought and he's been tracking it down. And I really love that he's looking at how the energy body works, and he's looking at it in the Neoplatonic tradition. We go to the Eastern tradition, we go to the extant tantric traditions to learn that Kundalini yoga, but it's in this other cultural context there, and we're in this Western Neoplatonic context, and so it's just lovely that he's actually pulled this out and articulated it, and then also made the connections, right? Because they're really very similar. They're historic connections. They're really similar in how they work. But what I love about Shaw's work is that he talks about the scholastic understanding of the theurgic spiritual experience as being an ascent. There's this idea that there's this hierarchy, and we are here on earth, and there's a heaven, and we're going up to the gods. And it's his life work, really. He's been developing this understanding that that's not exactly how it works, that the gods are within us, that there is an energy body, and it's that energy body that is the temple where we meet the gods. We're not flying somewhere, we're not dying, we're not going out of our bodies. It's in our bodies that this energy system exists. And that infusion of deity makes us a talisman for deity. And I think this is a really fundamental spiritual understanding. So I'm really excited to see him develop it. But he's academic, right? So I read it, I go straight to the last chapter, and he talks about this, and I'm like, okay, now where's the exercise? I'm a Llewellyn writer. I'm like, okay, where's the practice? And he doesn't do the practice. So
yeah, no, these are, and I think that's the value too. These are, his work, but also some of the other work that we follow too. They're solid scholarly work, and the best of it is informed by practice.
Right.
Because there's some things you really don't quite get it, without the background of practice. And I think, something I've seen not only in Gregory Shaw, but also in some of the other Neoplatonists I know, Neoplatonist scholars, I should say, is, there's been a widespread recognition that Neoplatonism especially is not dualistic. It's when you say Platonism, everyone thinks, oh, dualism, there's the realm of the forms, which is immaterial, and there's this world, which was nasty and we should get away from, which is kind of more of a Gnostic view, actually. But, that I think one thing that he's bringing out very clearly in this book is, especially in the later Neoplatonists, Iamblichus in particular, that is not the view. The view is that, as you were saying, that the gods are everywhere, but we have to essentially purify and tune our ethereal bodies so that they become a better receptacle for the gods, and that's really the process of divinization he talks about. But and he blames, I think, actually quite explicitly, Christianity for basically taking Neoplatonism and kind of distorting it to fit the Christian worldview, which was very dualistic, and that has then distorted later, for 1,000 years, or just about distorted later interpretations of Neoplatonism. Even people that are not coming at it from a Christian perspective, but are just, they're just raised in that culture, and so they've been misinterpreting it. But I think, there's a lot of the sort of the newer generation of Neoplatonic scholars, and the older generation too, have really come to the realization that Neoplatonism is not anti-body or anti-embodiment, and in that sense, detached from the world. And I think that's a very valuable corrective, and does then connect it up. Then you begin to see even more similarities with Tantra, which of course is exactly what he's exploring. A lot of us have sort of seen this, but he's just going through it in such detail and in such specifics that I think it really makes it very clear. So it's, and I'm only halfway through it, but through the book.
Well, and it's a citable reference too, because it really speaks to my personal experience as a ceremonial magician, and then as a tantric practitioner, that these are very similar. Or I want to respect the cultural context, right? But they're very similar ways of approaching the world and understanding it. So I really love that I can then cite it and say it's not just my, although as Jean-Louis says, we are the experts, but I can say, he agrees. And then I said, the practice, where do we go to the practice? And the other thing I'm working on is I've gotten back to writing the book that I'm working on, and I'm in the Kundalini chapter, which is exactly this conversation, because we have the Kundalini yoga, which developed in India, developed as part of Hindu and Hindu Tantra. And then Blavatsky and Crowley come along and pick up this idea and put it into the Western tradition. But they sort of mined it for material and put it into their own understandings. So it's not quite the same as in the culture itself. And there's a very helpful book I am reading just now. It's Rainbow Body, A History of the Western Chakra System from Blavatsky to Brennan. That's Kurt Leland. And he took the time to track down all the references, which again is really great, because then I can just, look at it and go and summarize it, right? But that's kind of where I am. Like, okay, let's talk about how this system works in its own context, and then what Western ceremonial did with it, and then how we can move into that today. How do we understand Kundalini yoga, and how do we understand Kundalini yoga as theurgists, right? So that's what I'm working on now.
Awesome. Anyone have any questions to ask anybody else, or any statements to make of what anybody else said? I'm focusing on a lot of Blavatskyan and post-Blavatskyan theosophy, which goes under the I Am movement and Ascensionism and all sorts of names now. And a lot of the cosmic religions that exist today, which are very much like Gnostic literature and Gnostic practice also, they're like post-Blavatskyan in very many ways. So I'm focusing on a very small subset of entities in this hierarchical ladder or triangle that they have. I'm tying it to the planetary spirits. I'm tying it to the archons and the aeons. I'm tying it to all sorts of different things, the chakras. And I'm using ancient Hebraic understandings and practices, notably the Merkava, mysticism, and the Hekkelot literature. That's a very shamanic model, and you can make parallels galore with it. So I've created experiences that teach people how to create a Merkava and how to enter the palace worlds. But I'm taking them into different models of the palace worlds. So I'm taking them into a planetary, into a Hellenic, into a more Hebraic, into an angelic. I'm going to be taking them to different versions of the palaces, and then just teaching them how they can enter this literature experientially, and how they can learn from it. And the folks at Unarius, which is a cosmic spirituality, they've been pretty good. They've written like more books than you could read in a lifetime, and it's all channeled literature with all its glories and limitations, but it's remarkably consistent. And they tell you, one of the techniques is you can actually go to these places by reading about them and then using your imagination. And once you master your imagination, you don't need any of the books because you can go wherever you want. And so that's a basic understanding. But when we follow different techniques, we tend to forget that. And we get caught up in the presentation and how the information, which is universal, gets compartmentalized. So I'm trying to figure out a way of retaining the flavor of the tribal or national or esoteric traditions in which this information finds itself in, but doing it in such a way where they have a choice as to where they go, and what they find will be free of some of the dogmatic or doctrinal understandings that accompany it. So it'll give them more freedom to interpret what they're experiencing on their own. So that's what I'll be doing for the rest of my time on this planet. So that's my big thing. And the theurgy is a very important part of it, because I never saw theurgy as like only the ascension. It's the anabasis, the going up to like in those circus things where you hit a hammer and a ball shoots up and hits the bell. It's kind of like that. And once it hits the bell, you got the ringing and it comes back down again. It's the reaching up to anchor and to bring back down and into this life. And the understanding that comes from doing that, whether you have a scholarly system or whether you do like street theurgy like I do, I guess, is basically once you get the connection, then your center of attention switches from up there to here, and you see that it's the same thing. It's I'm forgetting the words, they're hermetic, but anyway, macrocosm and microcosm. And then you bring the divine into this life, only to find that this life is already suffused with the divine. So the process becomes a process of transformation within you, and a shifting of perspective from here to your source. And then life doesn't get easier, but life becomes a lot more meaningful, I guess would be one way of explaining it. So that's where my attention currently is. And going from there, we still have some time. I've always wrestled with personal gnosis and unverified personal gnosis and verified personal gnosis, because ultimately all gnosis is personal. Somebody thought of it first, or expressed it first, or wrote it first, and then that's the source, and then other people built upon that source and used it to check new material coming in. And I wanted to just see how you guys felt about the gnosis, not gnosis. I'm sorry, I'm very fuzzy today. About gnosis in its verified and unverified forms. So I guess we'll start with Apollonius again.
Okay, well, yeah, I think they're both important. Obviously, I guess people I think are in some sense too adverse to UPG, unverified personal gnosis. Because from my perspective, a lot of the theurgy you do is for yourself, and the gods come and they tell you what you need to know, or they do with you what you need to know or need to have done, and put it in a form that is most meaningful and most convincing to you. And so I think in some sense, what most of us should be doing theurgy for, and the form it comes in, is very personal, and that's exactly just the way it should be. And in fact, I when I do theurgy, I do it by myself, and that's really sort of a recommendation from analytical psychologists too, for exactly the reason that you want it to be completely personal, and you don't want to in any sense be performing for somebody else or having other people's expectations contaminating the process. And so I think it's for most of the theurgy that we need to be doing, UPG is exactly what we need. Now, that doesn't mean I don't see any value in verification. Sometimes the verification comes personally if we have a premonition, or if we get some other kind of advice or something, or recommendations, and it works out the way we expect. Well, that's verification. Again, synchronistic events, are a kind of personal verification. They may convince other people too, but their most important part, I think, is that they convince us that that the communication came through clearly, I guess is what I want to say, and that we understood it. We all know from ancient tales about how difficult it can be to understand oracles, and that you can, if you let your ego get in the way, you can badly misunderstand an oracle. And so I think those are, some of the pitfalls of UPG, but that's just part of learning to be a better theurgist, I think, too. Um, but verification is interesting and important too, because the gods may have messages for a wider uh, audience than just the individual doing the theurgical act. And you know that's important too. And I don't know what more to say about it. There's so many different ways that gnosis can be verified, or can be publicly verified, I guess is what I should say, because it's a difference between personal verification and public verification. And public verification is the kind that most people are thinking about, I think, where people simultaneously receive the same information, for example. So those are, my thoughts about it. It's important, but it's certainly important not to confuse UPG with something that's universally valid for everybody. But usually it's more important just for you anyway.
Thank you very much, Apollonius. You guys switched around on my screen, so I'll just follow the. So we'll go to Tony.
We actually had this discussion a few months ago, and Apollonius raised a very important point. He pointed out that every major religion has actually started off from UPGs, where people have channeled messages from the divine, and some of those messages have stood the test of time, and others presumably haven't. When we look back on popular literature from a few decades ago, we find that there are all these channeled writings, and all of them tend to feel very, very generic. So, for instance, someone channels the spirit of Albert Einstein, and they'll have him talking about how important love and light are to the functioning of the universe, but no one has ever channeled his solution to the general theory of relativity, which was a project that he was working on before he died. So I would be more inclined to believe in UPGs if they were channeling information that could be verified. Say, for instance, someone channeled Einstein's solution to the general theory of relativity, and you had physicists checking out that particular solution and saying, yes, this is absolutely mathematically sound. And that would be far more convincing if it came from someone who did not have a background in high-level mathematics and physics. But for me, the term personal is all important in the term UPG. Any sort of revelations that we obtain from the gods are important to us personally. And I don't think that we should be shouting them from the rooftops and trying to peddle them as being authentic and imposing them on the will of others. I've run a number of workshops where people have channeled messages from the divine, and every once in a while you'll have people who don't really know each other, and yet they'll be channeling very similar messages from the gods. And that's when I tend to sit up and pay attention, when people who don't know each other wind up channeling very, very similar sort of stuff. So there is definitely something there, but I think that you have to exercise discernment in working out what you accept and what you think is possible and what you decide to ultimately reject as having only validity for the person who channeled it.
That's a good distinction. I have several people who, again, they don't know each other. They know of each other now because of the podcasts and things, but they don't know each other. And yet they've consistently over the years called me with messages and identified many of the times who's giving the message. And those messages have been consistent. And if I decide to shelve it for a while to think about what they said, I'll start getting synchronicities.
Wow.
So the synchronicity will tell me, don't shelve this, look at it like now. So yes, I know what you mean. And that is impressive when people don't know each other or who might not like each other even, so they're not communicating, come to you with the same message, claiming to be from the same source. Thank you. Brandy?
I was thinking about the way that people use unverified personal gnosis to kind of invalidate somebody's experience, like that's not a valid experience. So what does verified gnosis? And I was thinking about the individual relationship to community, right? So if you have a gnosis and then share it with somebody, they can find it useful or not useful. And that is as valid a source as an ancient text, right? So there you have to evaluate whether the ancient text is helpful to you or not. And I was also thinking about the people. There's like first contact stories, right? They're in the ancient world and in contemporary India, where you find people who have a first contact with the deity who says, "Hi, I am here, and you must build me a temple, and it must be right here." And so, people come and they build the temple, they build the little shrine, and then other people come and they start using it. And that's when it becomes part of the community. So that personal gnosis then becomes useful to other people. So West Bengal in the countryside, there's this little shrine to a saint, and people start coming, work with the saint. And then that saint sort of starts getting bigger and going out from that local community out into the general community. I think that's how the gods got bigger, right? In Greece, you find all these little teeny individual personal deities of the spring, and they get sort of eventually wrapped into the larger deity complexes, right? So I think personal gnosis is contact with deity that is helpful to you, and it becomes verified through its usefulness to other people and the way it grows into community.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense. And Jean-Louis?
Difficult after all that to say something about it. Maybe the first thing I want to tell you is that I was thinking about a nuclear plant. That seems strange. Yeah, because this is something dangerous and complicated to build, and we have to be scared of it, and in the same time we need it. And it could be the same here. My approach is slightly different. First, I think this is too easy to do. And I am always cautious about something too easy to do. You do a ritual, you do a meditation, and you have the contact with a deity, and you receive a message. When I say you, I mean anyone. And you feel good or bad, depending the time. Is it a deity or not? Who knows? Who cares? There is a message anyway. Are we talking about religion? Are we talking about magic? Or are we talking about theurgy? This is very vague. As Brandy said, someone heard a name from a deity saying, build me a shrine, a temple, and I do it. Is it theurgy? Is it magic? Or is it religion? Or a mix of all of it? Why is it important for me? Because if I am thinking in a traditional way as a school, for example, the first thing to think is about purification. If a deity exists somewhere, and this is why I was thinking about a nuclear plant, if there is a deity, a power, a divine power, anything, and we can think about alchemy, is my body, my mind, my spirit, my soul pure enough to receive the message without any distortion or not? How I can know that, and how I can be trained to really do this path. Not in India, not in Nepal, anywhere, just right here. And the first thing in a real theurgic path, traditional and so on, is to say to a beginner, if you receive a message, forget it. And continue the work, continue the focus, continue the meditation, breathing, concentration, and so on. You receive a message, I don't care, forget it. Don't listen to it. Until you reach really a more advanced level in which your body, your receptacle, will be pure enough to be trusted in a way. So this is, in fact, this maybe distinction between a theurgic path based on morality, based on purification and so on, and a magic or religious one in which you can welcome anything. Any intuition, any voice, divine or from the devil, doesn't matter. And a theurgic path. And the theurgic path first is purification and silence. And if you hear something, careful. That doesn't mean this is wrong. That just means, are you really ready to see if this is true or not, if this is useful or not? You have a lot of things that are very exciting, very fascinating, and they're trying to fool us. And we cannot see that right now. We can see that after a few months, after a few years, and so on, when we see the consequences. But in the moment, sometimes we cannot do and see anything. We trust because there are synchronicity, a lot of things. I give you an example with the tarot, for example. When I was using the tarot and to give a message to someone, sometimes the tarot was saying nothing. There is no answer. And when I was pushing a little bit, suddenly it was very clear. I had answers, a lot of things, and so on. And it was exactly what the guy was waiting for. It was most of the time true and wrong in the same time. It was what you are expecting, what you are waiting for, because I was pushing a limit that I was not supposed to push or to cross. And this is why at the start, I like to see this distinction between theurgy and, for example, magic with shamanism and so on. And you take a drum, you go outside in the desert or somewhere, and you can channel a deity. Okay, that's perfect, that's fine. But we are, for me, I am not doing theurgy when I do that. I am doing shamanism, I am doing magic or something like that, almost religious. And when I switch to a real theurgy path, first thing is silence. First thing, second is doubt. And then progressively, step by step, yes, you can purify yourself, and with a good training, you can start progressively to trust few things. And what we do in a group, such as I was talking about the Solis, what we do, for example, in a ritual, we give a ritual to several people from several cultures. And after a lot of purification and so on, you can see that the result, the effect is the same, no matter the culture. Really, even the visions, even the contact and so on. So this is individual, and in the same time, we are at a level that is not individual. So the experience is individual, but what we receive is not individual. We are touching something that is unique, common to all humanity, maybe the cosmos. But is it possible if I say, okay, let's do a ritual right now because I feel good? I'm not so sure. It could work, and I am sure because I do shamanism, I did for a very long time, and it works. But I don't say that this is strictly theurgy. This is magic, religion, and with a few things coming from theurgy, obviously, but not pure theurgy in a sense I see it or I experience it.
Well, thank you. And you read the mind of my programming, because next week that's the topic. It's called Gamesters and Tricksters. The cosmic spiritualities are going to tackle that one. So yes, what you say has a lot of validity, and it opens the door to other questions as to what exactly the difference between theurgy and magic and shamanism and all these other paths is.
Now, when I say that, I am not condemning anything.
No.
I'm not against that. I am just trying to see differences. When I do theurgy, I don't want to do religion. This is not because I am rejecting, mostly yes, but anyway.
No, I understood, and I value the difference in perspective. I think the value of these conversations, for me, other than I really like you guys and like talking to you, is the fact that we each, although we've stood in many of the same places, we stand in different places at different times, and we see things from the perspective of where we've stood and where we stand. And because we each have stood in a wide variety of places, we get pictures that are not exactly the same, but they widen our perspective and they open up doors for further inquiry and further inspiration and exploration. So I value everything you said from where you said it. And we've reached the end, unless somebody has a question to ask.
Yeah, I've actually got a question for Jean-Louis. You were talking about how important it was to go through a purification process so as to become a worthy receptacle for channeling messages from the divine. And I can see how that was the case, say, for instance, with the writings in the Philokalia. We had the Desert Fathers tradition in the Greek Orthodox Church, where you had these guys living a monastic lifestyle. They were living in a condition where they were absolutely pure and chaste and everything else. So that certainly adheres to what you're suggesting. To a lesser extent, you had the Qumran community, which produced the Dead Sea Scrolls. That was almost a monastic tradition as well. But I kept thinking that there were other teachers who channeled a lot of material. So you had the various Gnostic teachers, the teachers of Hermeticism. A lot of these people were wandering sages, and they may not have had the luxury of going through purification rituals, they would have just channeled messages from the divine. So I was wondering how much wiggle room there was in your idea of needing elaborate purification rituals in order to channel messages from the divine.
Yeah, I don't know about them. I really don't know about them, but I don't today such experience. First of all, you are talking about a Christian tradition, Orthodox tradition, and so on. And
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But when I was talking about purification, what I had in mind was maybe something deeper, like a moral one. I can express that just with humility and prudence. Let's say when you go, for example, when you go in a place like Egypt or Syria, when I was going there before the war, and you arrive in an ancient temple, you can cross that as a tourist, or you can suddenly realize that this is your sacred place. And when you realize that, immediately you are thinking, am I worthy to cross this threshold? Can I put my foot here or not? And this feeling is exactly what I am talking about. Nobody can answer beside you yourself. But when you are experiencing something and it can be exactly the same within you when you are doing a ritual, am I worthy or pure enough to even think about this invocation? This is what I am talking about purification. I am not saying don't do it. We are not in the context of an initiatory order or something else. But I would say, why do you want to do it? What is the intent? What is the goal? Why? What is your ultimate goal? Why have you this pretension to do it? For what? And this is for me one of the main questions in theurgy or anything of the kind. And if we do not have for us a very clear answer to these two questions, I am worthy to put my foot here, or why am I trying to do that, could be better to do nothing. That doesn't mean we must have a definitive answer, because we cannot. We have our answer today, but at least clearly play the questions and think about these questions. Because like that, we will avoid, I am sure, a lot of troubles and things like that.
Thank you.
I don't want to to be too rude to everyone, but I share my thinking. That's it.
No, and that is welcome, and I thank you for it. I know some of you have to go because it's 10 o'clock sometime. So, Brandy, would you like to share your contact information and your upcoming projects?
Sure. Brandy Williams author, brandywilliamsauthor.com, Brandy Williams author on Facebook, Patheos Star and Snake. And I posted a story about our last conversation. So that was the most recent thing that I've done.
Thank you so very much. Jean-Louis de Biasi.
Yeah, I posted in the chat, debiasi.org, and you register to the newsletter and you will receive from time to time latest news.
Thank you so very much. Apollonius of the library.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm on Facebook as John Opsopaeus, OPSOPAUS. I have two websites, opsopaeus.com and wisdomofhypatia.com. And either of those websites are the easiest way to get a hold of me, or Facebook.
And both websites will take you to earlier websites, which are the hidden library. So look thoroughly through the websites and find those links. And last but not least, Tony Mierzwicki.
Facebook, personal and author page. Also, I have a blog on Patheos. And Jean-Louis, we want you to share your views on this program. That's the whole point of having the panel. And if you're saying something that the rest of us aren't totally comfortable with, that's good. We have to think about why we're not totally comfortable with it. That's how we all grow. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Underlined exclamation point. Thank you, Tony. That was excellently said. And thanks to a wonderful audience. This will be up by tomorrow in the middle of the day sometime. And thank you all. I've been looking forward to this, and I wasn't disappointed, and now I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Good night.